Please rise for silent invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Ford.
Present.
Councilmember Tremont.
Here.
Councilmember Stiltner.
Here. I was going to say, he has to unmute.
There's a little delay
Vice
there.
Mayor Bastian.
Here.
Mayor Burnett.
Here. All are present. Discussion items, item 4, budget recap of CIP and general fund. Dr. Scott Niels, the floor is yours.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much for the opportunity to present tonight. This presentation is not significantly different other than the one we saw, or you saw last time, with the exception of the revenue and expenses adjusted for the maximum millage that the council approved at the last meeting. So we'll show that where it shows up here. So the purpose for tonight is to update the City Council on the proposed budget. We have not completed the all funds yet. We're close to that. So by the time you see the next presentation, that'll include all funds. But tonight we're going to focus on the general fund. For your information, the max millage was set at 4.6869, and we have 2 public hearings scheduled. The first will be Wednesday, September 9th at 5:30 here in these. Yes, sir.
Scott, the trim notices that went out had us down Wednesday, September 9th at 6:30
yes,
on the
they're-
trim notices. Does that create a notification problem for us if we advertise this differently?
I don't think so, since that's a change in time.
I don't know. It's been 5:30 since it was scheduled with me, but we can do 6:30 if that's easier.
If we haven't advertised it yet, and
I haven't
because
published it.
and because it's on the trim
It is on the trim
notices,
notice at 6:30.
I'd like to stay consistent if possible in
our-
regards to the public.
Website for 5:30, but
Well, moving it to an hour later on something is better than moving it to an hour earlier and have somebody show up after it's done.
yep, understood.
If I were,
That was my error. When I first did that, I didn't know that Robin had set it at 5:30 and we sent it out.
Okay.
So those will be at 6:30.
Jake?
if I can ask a quick question of our attorney. Matt, last year we had, and Robin, we had like a 1-minute thing.
It has to be after 5 o'clock.
That's it.
And we did it at 5 o'clock.
We did it at 5. Okay,
Right.
so we'll be good. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
But 6 o'clock, 6:30 we're good.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the second public hearing on September 23rd, both of those are on a Wednesday. So make sure that you have those on your agenda and your calendar. To recap, the 2020 taxable value was 3.7 million. Backing out the 2 CRAs, we end up with a 2020 taxable value, excluding the CRAs, of 3.721 million. That gives a value of 1 mil at 95%. As you may recall, that we do not send that out at 100%. We use 95% for budgeting purposes. So that's 3.535 million value for 1 mil, or 354,000 approximately for 1/10 of a mil. The max millage was set at 4.6989, and that generated an additional $613,500 using that millage rate and those taxable values. The comparison, you can see the proposed budget the city manager presented was originally at 4.5254, generating $40,662,000 of revenue and offsetting expenses for a balanced budget. The additional $613,500 increased the total general fund revenues to $41,276,000, and also the proposed expenses also giving a balanced budget. Included in the millage, we also need to incorporate the debt. As you can see, our debt has been slowly coming down. The millage is what is required to pay the debt service, and we've been paying down debt. So this year's debt service is 0.2519, and total debt service payments is $902,000. Adding those two together, the FY20 adopted was 4.7979. If the council elects to stay at the same 6.989, the total millage would be 4.9508. That is a 0.1529 increase in the total millage, or 3.19% overall.
And how much increase is it over rollback? About 10?
That's 10.76, I believe.
Thank you.
With the debt?
No.
No, I think
that's
that was
just
just
No,
the
that was
operating.
just operating, not.
With
With
not
the debt,
okay.
it's gotta be about 6 or 7.
Just as a matter of course,
Maybe a
we've
little
never
higher than that.
included the debt in the percentage over rollback before in conversations. That would be a new comparison.
Okay.
This slide has been slightly updated to include the additional revenues that we anticipate. We had 14 million at the end of FY19 for 37.9% over your expenses. We have $795,000 projected for the net fund balance increase this year. That'll probably be a little higher because the state revenue sharing was not as significant decrease as we had originally thought. We had forecast about 30%, and it appears to be running across the area here about 16%. So there'll be additional funds that drop to the balance.
15%, how does that equate? in-
Decline.
Yeah, from how's it, dollar-wise, what does that equate to?
That's about an extra $500,000 because I figured the hit was going to be about $1 million total from what it was. So if we're at half of that, we should pick up another 500,000 approximately. I left
So-
this number for calculation purposes because I think it will be more than this, but I'd rather be conservative than overestimate what our fund balance will be.
So the net change could be about 1.1, 1.2 mil?
Possibly.
Okay.
It's trending that way, but as soon as we get next month's numbers in from the state, I'll have a little better feel for what that final number will be.
Isn't the state talking about going back and revisiting the budget in light of some of their shortfalls?
It's possible, I have not heard that.
Wasn't there some discussion
The
in the last
discussion
couple
was,
weeks?
is, yeah, that
I mean,
amongst
nobody
themselves is they were quite content to let the governor solve it with his
solved it
veto pen
with
this
his
year,
veto.
and that they
Yeah,
would
but I
not.
thought he sort of threatened maybe.
Oh, he did,
going
but
back.
both
Okay.
leaders of both houses said that they didn't see a need for special sessions, so
Okay,
they've got to call it.
okay.
Of course, who knows what the future holds with this?
So the minimum fund balance at this case would be about 11.7 million. That's your 30% policy. So that would provide approximately 3.5 million for the council to consider for uses that are over and above what your policy is. And then the question the council needs to address, I think, is that something they want to do at this point? Are there operational expenses that council would consider paying with fund balance, which is not necessarily in concert with your policy, but certainly the council can adjust their policy. And then directing the city manager on how those funds should be allocated. And, oops. Just to refresh your memory, on the 317 fund, we presented a need for 1.941 million. Those are broken out in imperative, essential, important, and desirable. On the imperative, there's 561,000. Notice that the gear extractors and dryers, the third item there, is also on our budget request that's going to county for the CARES Act reimbursement. And the public work fence replacement is actually a total of $30,000, but there's 10 in this particular 317 budget. The other funds, 311 and 401, are expected to contribute $10,000 to that. In our budget proposal, we had identified some a la carte requests. And again, none of the 317 is funded, none of the a la carte is funded in this current budget. You can see that, excuse me, the X's are ones that are proposed to be funded with fund balance. The total X's are down there at the bottom, 155,080. That leaves a balance of about $65,000 that would be funded, proposed to be funded with millage, and if necessary, that'd be just under 2/100ths of a mil. These are non-general fund a la carte requests. And you can see there, if you look at the a la carte, down at the bottom, you can see the 503 fund, the tire mount, dismount. Those funds, the 503 fund and most of the other funds, get allocated back to the general fund, and that's about a 65% of the total value is absorbed by the general fund. So part of it is here on the general fund, and the balance is listed here in the non-general fund for the 503 with the bottom line. And these are other ones for the Public Works 401 fund, or the public utilities, the drainage, forestry management, and then the general fund, or the vehicle maintenance, non-general fund component. So a total of about $790,000 for that.
So I take it that we're looking for some guidance from us on
Yes,
these
sir.
3 charts?
Yes, sir.
What's the recommendation of the city manager?
So, Mayor, based on our fund balance, and I think we had a conversation the other day, it was somebody else, but based on our fund balance and our yearly rollover to fund balance of anywhere between 500 and 750,000. It's been as high as 1.5 million one year since I've been here. I think that we can pretty much chunk out most of the 317 fund and put that money into the general fund to pay for those capital improvements. We've been kicking the can on capital improvements here and there throughout the last 2 years, waiting for hurricane money to come back, and that was the plan. And you know, I've even talked about it this year. Remember what we've kicked next year when it comes to next year. Well, here we are. This is next year from 2 years ago and last year. So these projects that are on the slide that he's showing right now are kick the can projects. We were able to sneak one in this year, but the rest of them are coming due. Out of that not out of the $1.9 million, but out of the $3.5 million that Dr. Neal said that you have available to kind of mess with and still stay above the 30%, which does not count, if I recall, Scott, the money that's going to roll this year. That 3.5 million is independent of that, or is it including that?
That's
It hasn't
including
happened yet.
Including it, but he's already included it.
Okay.
But we have requested about, I think, $650,000 of funding through the CARES Act.
Mm-hmm.
That will be, and that's already been not approved by me, but agreed to, that it's a CARES Act funded item. As more and more cities apply, more and more cities are applying for the same things we are, so it's kind of, we're in it with the rest of the people, so that gives me a little more justification. But that $650,000 that the federal government in 9, 12, 18 months can come back, and the Secretary of Treasury can say, yeah, Port Orange, not so much. I'll pay for your hands-free flushing toilets and your paper towel dispensers, but I will not pay for your off-site permitting software or your off-site contract software. So I think it's important that we reserve, and we have with this ask, we've reserved over $650,000. So when that bill comes from the Treasury, should we get nothing, we can pay that bill because it will come due. I concur with Dr. Neal's, and we've had these conversations in the past that we should not spend fund balance for operating. That will be that will be okay this year, but it will set you up for failure next year, and that will be a tremendous hurt on the city as far as millage goes, based on this year's budget and next. And as far as the a la carte $64,000 at the current rate you have. The way I've done my math, and I don't do my math the same way Dr. Niels does, so he can probably come up with half of what I have, but the way I do my math based on some of the guidance you've given us, I can probably cut 0.05 mil out of your max millage and fund everything that you've currently asked us to fund. That's not including these a la carte requests. So it would probably be a good time to kind of walk through these a la carte requests at some point prior to first and second reading and come up with a semi-solid list of how we want to carve those out, what we want to do, what we don't want to do, and it becomes, if you're for using fund balance, it becomes a little bit easier to fund that $155 worth of a la carte. If the answer is, I think all these items are needed, I just don't know if we can afford them, we can afford them with fund balance. The $64,000 worth of things that come out of millage, I can pay for at the 4.6989 and still save you a little bit of money, I think. And you know why I say I think, because there's still things in fluctuation out there. But at the end of the day, it might be cutting it close. I might be at 0.25 mil less than 6989. So that's something we're going to really have to take a hard look at. Now, you can deny everything that is paid for by millage. It's at the tune of, just short of $65,000. And it's not going to make you feel any better when I give you that new millage rate. It's going to be 4.698, something less than 9, but not much, because $64,000 doesn't do much to dent the millage rate. So that's kind of where we are. There's a few of those things that you're going to see we probably need, but we'll find out based on the next meeting and how our discussions go with the rec, what you want to do with that. But there's a recreation manager in there that'll cost us a little bit of money, and some reclasses and other things that we can do without, but it'll come at some service level decrease or something not being done for a little while. But staff, I'll tell you, staff does understand where we are this year and where we might be next year. So
I'm glad they do, because I'm not sure I do.
Well, we
There's
don't.
so many things we have.
We don't understand. We don't have a crystal ball, but we understand what it could be.
Yeah.
It could be it could be a banner year. It could be not so good at all. So
It will probably be something in between.
Doc, what is our, how much do we have rolling over to fund balance from this fiscal year?
Right now, I forecast that 795, it may be a
that's
little
what it
higher.
was, okay.
Which is a little lower than last year. I think it was about 8.5 last year, 836.
it ebbs and flows when we, yeah. The good news is, by the way, this is kind of one of the good news stories about Workday is we didn't have that number last year this early on. It was like, man, it's around. That's and it's subject to change, but that's a Workday. We can get you that number now. Item.
I know you've gone
And
over this
again-
before. Do you have, I'm sorry, Drew.
Okay, you can go first. But
I know we've gone over this before, but do you have any numbers on hand again to see what kind of impact that our budget's experienced due to COVID? Whether it's Parks and Rec not bringing stuff in, is it significant enough?
It's less significant than originally thought. Most of that impact was from the state revenue sharing.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it was about 50 or 60,000 net revenue loss that we had on Parks and Rec for not having the summer programs.
Right.
The revenue obviously was less, but then we didn't have the expense on the
Expenditure,
personnel
yeah.
side.
So keep in mind, a lot of the stuff that we canceled in Parks and Rec is highly subsidized to begin with.
Right.
So, you know, when you're subsidizing 50% or 75% of baseball and you cancel baseball, that's 50% that I don't have to subsidize. So, it's either a wash or in some cases.
No, we still got the facilities cost.
Again, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Fixed
absolutely,
cost
you got the
facility.
facilities cost, but
Plus wear and tear.
but you're only losing 50% of what you think you're losing.
And Scott, again, you said that net change for fiscal year 20 could be potentially 500,000 more.
Potentially,
So maybe somewhere between 4 and 5
correct.
with the, okay.
But right now, my story is 795.
Okay, yeah, because that's, I mean, we know that pretty much is to the penny, basically. Do we?
Just one thing, just to remind, that gear extractors, if you're looking at the 317 fund, what the city manager had indicated that holding back some of those funds for the COVID thing in case, this is one where they may or may not approve that. So I would suggest that you just kind of hold that, you take the 44 out of what you have because we're going to submit that to the county for reimbursement, and if we do, then you wouldn't need to fund it. If they don't, and you still determine that that's something you'd like to do, then there would be fund balance available to pay that.
Do we want to go down through the 317 items and the a la carte items tonight?
So I
yes.
believe
Kinda-
that 317's been approved in concept. The question is, if you don't want to, you've already said we need it. Now the question is, do you want to pay for it? By virtue of, you already said we need it.
Yeah.
I found a way to pay for it without millage, assuming that you wanted it, if I could figure out a way to pay for it.
Yeah.
So the
Not
bigger
interested in
question,
going backwards.
the bigger question, Drew, is do you want to whittle down your fund balance approximately $2 million out of the 3.5 that's available before you get down to 30%?
Okay.
The a la carte are decision items.
Yeah. Well, most of the ones in the 317 are imperative or essential. So yeah, I'd like to, if we can find a way to make it happen, I'd like to make it happen.
I found a way to make it happen.
Okay.
The a la carte items,
Yes, sir.
generally speaking, the impact of the general fund is minimal, but refresh my memory exactly what we're trying to accomplish with code there.
Let me get there.
I don't have a problem with any of these, I just want to make sure I know what I'm talking about with that.
The $500 or the 3,000 there?
Well, we're talking about,
Code personnel, the
Personnel.
reclass.
the 2,400, yeah.
Oh.
We're reclassifying a staff assistant to administrative assistant.
So that position, if I recall, and is Chief in the
He
background?
was here earlier.
Or Jamie? So if I recall, that position is currently a staff assistant, but she works as an administrative assistant in the code enforcement for Deb Pearson. And the reclass puts her in a position of which she is working right now. If I recall, this is Katie Sowicki's
Okay.
job.
Has there been a desk audit of that? I mean, how'd you determine she's working at a higher grade?
That was done by our HR rep. Our HR rep
At
looked
whose
at what she
request?
does. That was Chief, that was at your request to get Katie reclassed?
Yes.
Yeah, so Chief requested it with all reclassifications, the department head requested it, HR looks at it, makes sure it's a valid request. We have a reclassification board to decide at my level whether it's something that goes forward or not, and it goes forward with the budget or not.
Well, what's the compelling story for that? In a time of difficult dollars, is this the year to do it?
The year was probably 2 years ago when we didn't do
Okay.
it, or last year when we didn't do it, but Chief?
Good evening, Tom Grimaldi, Police Chief. Yeah, so we asked for a reclass of the position. It's a administrative assistant, I believe is the the
Staff
term
assistant to
staff-
administrative assistant.
Staff, yes. Which came with code over to the PD about 2 years ago or so when that was brought over to the PD. When we got there, we really looked at the whole code enforcement unit and kind of reorganized a lot and did things a little bit differently. One of the things we noticed was her role, we felt, could handle more things. So we did provide more things. One of the first things we did was when my senior administrative assistant is out, either on vacation or out sick, we never had a backup before. She is the backup. And if you look at the senior administrative assistant's job description, the very first thing on there is, or I'm sorry, on the staff, which one am I going with again?
She's becoming an admin assistant.
Admin assistant. There's too many assistants here. The admin assistant, the first bullet in that serves as the senior administrative assistant's backup. So we've done that. We've also tasked her with our annual report. So that takes that work off of we used to do it with my captains. We just gave it to her. She organizes that. She's putting that together. We do the training certificates into the database. We have to put that into a particular database for the state. She's responsible for that because I have one person in training, and we just can't keep up with that. We've also used her recently to develop the PAL marketing materials. Now, I say recently, we started that last year. It's kind of been on hold because, quite frankly, PAL has been in a neutral position with the COVID because we can't get any gyms or anything like that. But all the marketing materials we use for that, she's responsible for. Monthly tow invoices, it's something that we do a much better job now of actually auditing them and keeping track of them and trying to keep our tow service, our wrecker service, on their toes. In the past, we ran into some issues, as our attorney would talk about. I think we actually had to bar somebody because we found a lot of discrepancies. We also have her do the same thing with our dry cleaning vendor as well. So we keep them on their toes. So there's a lot of different tasks that some of them fell into no man's land and weren't getting done. Some of them have been reallocated to her so that we can have our staff work on other things. And so we do feel that it does fit the job description for the staff assistant, and we feel she's doing the work, and that's why I did ask for that.
Hey, Chief, does she not, if I recall, and this happened before this, she does additional code paperwork that puts our code enforcement people out on the street, similar to your, you said that she gets a
does.
captain doing his
Yeah.
captain job, but it also gets our sworn officers
So
on
she
the
does with
on
our
the road.
code people. We try to keep them on the street as much as possible. Typically, what will happen in a code case, there's a lot of research that has to be done on ownership and such. So they'll have to come in and they start running through that. They actually use, I think they even speak with the community development quite often as well, and they get information that way. What we have them do now is we try to make it a little bit more efficient to keep them on the road. They call that information in to the current assistant, and she does all the investigative work, if you will, not investigative work, but all the background work and supplies it to them. So she does that as well. But that is part of the code enforcement side of it. Probably.
I don't have much problem with these. The third list is the one where,
I have one question on the
go
a la
ahead.
carte list.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Jog my memory for me. The system for the spare ambulance, refresh my memory, what is that?
It's the system that allows, I think it allows two people to push the gurney on without the three-man lift.
Okay, I
allow-
do remember. I think they referred to it as a gurney,
It's
the-
automatic lift or something.
for
they
the
call
for
it.
the stretcher.
Right.
Okay, I just wasn't sure exactly.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a COTS. Is
Yeah,
that what it's called, the
it's like a
COTS?
power stretcher. It lifts, so they don't have to do it
It
with their
allows
back.
one
It'll
person to, but the.
yes. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
And we try. we tried every way to get that into the CARES Act. We just couldn't
Yeah.
make it fit any of the spots where it wouldn't raise a few eyebrows. And the last thing I want is one little thing to raise the eyebrow on the whole city's.
Well, and the
CARES
spare
Act
ambulance was affordable enough to us that, you know, we could make it right and make it, you know, more user-friendly, so, yeah. Okay.
Can you speak to the recreation manager and the need for 2 maintenance trucks in Parks and Rec?
That's my question as well.
So the 2 maintenance trucks will come out of fund balance. I think those are for, I don't know, I'll wait for Susan to chime in. The recreation manager is in fact for the new community center. That's a gap billet right now. We don't have it, but as we come up online, we want that person to be here to get our recreation stuff up to speed. So when we get the rec, we're banging on all cylinders. That is a position it's in there now, right? But no, it's unfunded. Unfunded. But we'd like it this year, pending unless we kick the rec down the road. As you'll hear later on today, there's some cost overruns based on requests to increase its size.
Jake, I thought we were in a hiring freeze, or are we not? Do we lift that?
In certain circumstances, there are a few billets that I've allowed to be funded in the short term this year that were funded, but there are still some that aren't.
Jake, if I remember right, I think Susan said those maintenance trucks are due to the relocation of the maintenance shed and moving equipment back and forth from where they are now, that they need that additional capacity.
Yeah, well, are you reading what you just read?
Oh,
Can they
no,
make
I'm
2
not.
with 1?
I was just remembering what you said.
So the 2 trucks will be for crews being moved to the river during the construction of the wreck. That's it.
So
They
we're
use-
buying 2 for a 12 to 18 month event?
No, I think they're gonna stay there, and then we'll hire new maintenance for the wreck that will go back into the Gators, or they already have been hired.
So you're talking about increased personnel in several years, is that what I'm hearing you say?
That was a given with the wreck, I believe.
Okay.
That was a soft buy-in when we decide to go with the wreck.
Well, if the timeline for the rec project has been delayed, I seriously question whether we need 9 months funding for the recreation manager in the rising fiscal year. You know, all things being considered, you may be looking at next fiscal year. And the other thing I would say is, I still think we should scrap the I-95 gateway signage, and I'm willing to put that toward the reclassification in the police department that Chief just talked about. But I'm unwilling to spend both of those. That's the only comments I have.
Yeah, matter of fact, those are going to be my similar comments, particularly the recreation manager. I see the need in the future, but with the unknowns, you know, again, everything changes. I'm still in my position I was in before, as it pertains to millage increase. However, on the discussion of fund balance and reserves for our projects that we have been kicking the can, I am certainly amenable to these.
Is
I don't
these
wanna
the
spend
plural
the-
for both the 317 and the a la carte, or you're just talking about a la carte?
I'm speaking more toward the 317, not as much for the a la carte right now, although, you know, I don't take an issue with these.
Jason, you good with all the 317 items?
I don't know that I'm good for all of them. They obviously all need to be done. I still maintain my position on the gateway signage. But I believe we definitely need to be knocking out some of these.
Yeah.
So, something to consider, and we saw it today. I think you all that checked your email saw a little bit of the 12-inch water main break.
Yes.
So this year, we have a little bit, because we've been kicking this CIP can for 2 years now, because of Matthew and Irma. This is the year we said we'd do it. When the money came in, the money's in. So next year, I guarantee you, our infrastructure is gonna start failing more often, and we are gonna be, maybe not have a funding problem to pay for that stuff, because it would come out of a different fund, but we are gonna be busy replacing PVC glass pipe with a different type of pipe to try to preclude these floods from happening. And that PVC pipe is all over the city. It was the in thing in the 70s, and it's not the in thing in the 21st century. So we need to start replacing that stuff before more of it fails. The bridge failed. We've had 4 failures on Spruce Creek. It just keeps on creeping up the road 300 feet each time. Yet still ends up around the same property. And we need to nip that in the bud. We also have some other projects across the river that we need to pay attention to. So just keep in mind that the city staff also has capacity issues at some point with CIP. So I'm a strong proponent of knocking these projects out. The I-95 signage, that's if you recall, we had the discussion last time about the $4,000 licensing and FDOT hand holding to keep it going. You know, I understand your point, but I also understand that usually it's around a consensus of 3-2 as well. But when it comes down, and this is a workshop, but when it comes down to crossing that off, we can cross that off. Just keep in mind, all that does is put another $4,000 into your savings account for next year.
But
and I know this isn't about the millage, but it's about the millage.
Jake, also, if we
Yeah.
put that off, then when we decide to do it, there's gonna be some extra startup cost, and to get that gateway signage can moving
Yeah,
again.
we're gonna have to just resurrect it. It's not the end of the world,
Well,
but,
I mean, I'm supportive of it going through, so we don't have to go to,
but the $4,000 now might be $4,500
Yeah.
in 2 years, I don't know.
yeah, and
I
that's what I'm
can't
thinking.
speculate.
On the, city center tunnel project design, there's 20,000 there. Is that I mean, it's not in danger or anything, it's just.
Yes, it is. It's on the verge of being structurally dangerous, as well as,
Yeah.
we gotta do something with it.
So what, that's gonna
More
tell
the
us.
top than the bottom. You're not gonna fall
Yeah,
onto the street.
Okay.
But, you know, many a truck has hit that.
yeah, but it's
3
still,
since I've been here.
it's still solid.
Yeah, well, apparently, but
So we're just talking about the top,
unsafe.
we're not talking eliminating that tunnel.
We're
Design.
20 grand for every option known to mankind, and we talked about them a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
including getting rid of it and just putting a door there for department heads.
Yeah, that's
Show
kind
us
of
the
one of
door,
those,
Jake.
to me, that's one of those
That'll go over like a
iconic
lead balloon.
things that kind of, you know, from the day. Now, if we have to do something with the top, that's fine, but I kind of want to take the talk of eliminating that tunnel off the table. The walkway.
That-
We could talk about the covering or whatever, but
You-
the walkway itself.
Council can tell me what to
Okay,
do, and I'll march
okay.
off smartly. I have no option in my mind yet, other than I need 20 grand to get options.
Okay. Tell me again what, and just to continue to finish that portion of the gateway signage, I understand the rationale of keeping it. I just wouldn't support it ever. I thought, again, I think we have a great sign that the pavilion has put in at this point, and I think we've done a good job having the brushes cleared out, and it looks like a welcome sign anyway. But that, again, that's just my opinion. Can you tell me again, what this Riverwalk, Park South, is? That's a portion of the design, or is that construction?
That's a continuation of
That,
the trail.
so if you recall last week, we got the developer to do
Right.
the design. That was part of the deal. So it will be designed. The purchase of that will be approximately $1.2 million, I think, and this is our share of the trail. The rest of it will be fined in the water and echo on land.
Gotcha.
Yeah, we gotta continue with that too.
Yeah, so this is grant
Yeah,
match
that was
money.
my question. I wondered if what we decided, what happened last week went into that, or that was a separate portion.
Other questions about the à la carte?
That was 317.
I'm sorry.
Yep,
Yeah,
sorry.
questions about, well, we've been bouncing around.
Yeah,
between-
you have. I just want to make sure.
Other
that-
questions about either, I guess I should say.
Yeah, there you go.
Looking at
What?
Scott,
He's pondering something.
he's pondering, clicking unmute.
I just, listening to the discussion, I apologize because some of the audio, I've lost a couple of times and I can hear some of you better than others, so my apologies. Just the discussion in terms of us doing everything we possibly can to utilize fund balance for operational expenditures that are gonna continue to grow into the future. I wholeheartedly agree and that we should only do that if it's something that's critical and we just don't have any other, we've exhausted those other resources now. The gateway signage, I don't know how you can trade that for an operational thing on personnel, because that cost would be truly operational, that's gonna continue. So I think if you nix the gateway signage 4,000, then that just seems like that just goes back into fund balance. So, and that's kind of for me at least, in my mind and the vision of things, I would like to try to keep it going. I've kind of looked at that vision from I-95 all the way through the Dunlawton corridor, all the way down into the River District as a true vision for the entire city. I don't look at it so much as, and I get that funding wise, a lot of those elements get broken up into sections and projects. I got that, but ultimately, that vision has come to be put together to string all that together, all the way through the River District, even onto the other side. Well, I know that's the stuff that we're trying to do down under, all of that stuff. I just see that all as part of one complete total vision and project with a lot of different parts and pieces. So that's just my concern on that would be I do want to keep that going, and I know that the large part of getting that done is not reachable right now, but I do want to try to keep that project moving.
Okay.
So, Mayor, for consideration, by the way, on the recreation manager, if everything goes as planned, I guess, and we discussed with Parks and Rec, and we determined that we're going to move forward with the rec in either a lesser capacity than designed or as designed, and add more money to it. The speculation is that it will start in April or May and be done by November. If we hire a rec manager next fiscal year, he won't get here until December. He or she won't get here until December or January. So you're going to have an open rec without anybody managing it. And the rec isn't a gym where we're handing out basketballs. It's going to be a little more robust than that. So our plan is to make do with some people, in addition to this rec manager that we hire in the short term, and in FY22, you're going to see a request for the remaining staff for the rec, and we did talk about this at length like 3 joint sessions ago, that this building doesn't come without added manpower. And we all kind of raised our hand and said we understood that at the time.
We also haven't talked about the programs that generate the fees later on
Correct.
that offset some of these costs as well.
Correct.
Where are we at the, on the cost of the rec? I know I believe we were declined this past, well, it wouldn't have mattered anyway, because all that money from the state
We're
was.
going over to the joint
Doing-
meeting to discuss that
Gotcha.
this evening. Yep.
Well, the elephant in the room isn't even what we're talking about right now. The elephant in the room is our labor contracts.
That is correct. And that will have a significant impact on other things in the budget that could lower our service level to make budget at the max millage rate.
Mhm. On the non-general fund requests, these are drainage fund type things. A few months ago, we did the workshop and we talked about the potential of bringing street sweeping in-house. And I'm seeing the costs associated with that there. Have we done any kind of cost benefit to when we break even on that? Potentially based on what we project a new contract would cost if we continue to outsource it?
Good evening. Lynn Stevens, Public Works Utilities Director. Yes, when we did the presentation, it was pretty much a wash between what we're paying for the contract versus what it would cost us to staff and provide all the equipment and materials for staff. The only out-of-pocket expense was the equipment.
I'm talking about is the recovery period.
So the recovery period would be about 7 years for the
Okay.
equipment. Because the cost, we generated, I think we saved about $40,000 a year between us doing it in-house. But we also included the payback in our annual cost to take over the program. We included in our annual cost the repayment to replace those trucks over time.
Okay.
So it's a one-time expense to purchase the 2 street sweepers, and then the ongoing is already budgeted in our street sweeping account because it's the same as the contract services.
Oh, and I know we get a ton of advantages too. Certainly not having
Absolutely.
having them readily available after storms and the like.
Absolutely. Just the rain that we had last week, the storm drains here at City Center filled up. Well, the street sweepers came through the night before, and so there was no one there to sweep up. We came through with the Vector and tried to clean up as much as we could, but there was still a lot of debris out there. Same thing when the trees drop.
Right.
We go through that every year with the parking lots. So it has some significant advantages to us to be able to do this work in-house.
And I think another one of those advantages, just like you said, the street sweeper would come through the night before or whatever and say, well, they're not getting out of the truck if they see something in the drain, but if there are employees, that could be part of their thing. If you see something blocking or potentially blocking that drain, get out and pick it up and, am I right? Or am I missing
Exactly,
something?
you're exactly right. And
Okay.
if they can't get out of the truck and do it with the vehicle they have,
Call it
at
in.
least they can call it in.
Yeah.
We're aware of it, and we don't have to wait till there's an issue.
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about that drain backing up and water backing up everywhere and
Right.
keep them moving a little better.
The other nice thing about having it in-house is if there is an issue in the city, we have the equipment to go take care of it right away, instead of paying extra to have the company come hours later, as it may be.
And 2 trucks, do we need 2 employees, or is that you can
And-
handle it with what you have?
So in here, I have included 2 equipment
Personnel.
operators,
Okay.
and I've included 2 vehicles.
Okay.
That's part of that. Oh, I'm sold on the
Oh, I
program.
see.
I'm
Okay,
sold
I
on the
see the whole
advantages.
amount
I was
now,
just
yeah.
curious about how we're amortizing, since we're having to purchase the heavy equipment up front.
Yes, and then
So-
again,
So
we're-
basically 7
we're-
years is,
We're paying for that equipment over 7 years into the fleet replacement fund. So when that equipment is due to be replaced, and we'll generally get about 10 years out of them, so you'll get 3 years of not paying into fleet replacement fund. So you'll have an extra 3 years
No,
there.
that is good
But then the
information.
money is already there when it is time to replace those vehicles.
And did you count
And we
for
do
the
that with
expected-
all,
I'm sorry.
that's for all capital vehicles.
Okay.
Trucks, gators, mowers.
Yeah.
We always have the upfront expense, and then
Okay.
the departments pay
replacement.
into the fleet replacement
Replacement
fund
and
thereafter.
And then on the street sweepers and equipment and those things, are the expected maintenance cost in there as well?
Yes, sir.
Like, just to maintain the trucks without something breaking?
That's correct.
Okay.
What we did is we went back to the manufacturer, we asked them what the routine maintenance cost is for
Yeah.
the vehicle, and then we added a little extra because there's always extra as the units age.
And do we know if those engines are gasoline or diesel?
Good question. No, I don't know off the top of my
Let's
head.
find out.
CNG.
I believe they're diesel,
Okay.
but I won't swear to it at this particular
Those
juncture.
are generally far
We-
more reliable.
We are looking at the vacuum type instead of the water type. So
Oh,
they are a
okay.
bit more efficient.
Okay.
They're a little noisier in the neighborhood, so
That's
we'll
okay.
we'll be able to adjust the
Yeah.
times that we do the neighborhood sweeping. We'll also be able to maintain the level of service that we currently have.
Jake, I don't have a problem with all of this, but what I'd like to do is just kind of make the rec manager contingent, how we approach the rec manager contingent upon with the decisions we make with the rec itself.
So we can, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll know by second reading and, well, let's do it by first reading. We've done second reading before. We'll know by first reading where we sit with the rec, with the elected officials and be able to move forward.
Very good. Any other questions?
Just a comment, one final comment, looking through, real quick, just looking through the à la carte requests, I've seen these in some years where they're a mile long, and I at the very least appreciate the department directors understanding the situation we're in.
Okay.
This was I mean,
I know
early
there's a
on,
lot of needs up there.
it's, not only did you tell us what you wanted, early on, it became very apparent in February, March, April, what the situation was. And I'm cautiously optimistic that Councilman Stiltner's right, and the economy will continue to go, and people will come out of this and get their jobs back that don't have jobs and be able to make up their mortgage payments. But I don't know if it's going to be as pretty as I want it to be. So, things that worry me is not worry me, but things that Scott and I talk about philosophically is 95% the right number of percentage of people that'll be paying their mortgage, right? For those of us that have home loans, our mortgage is paid right up front, so we get the quick person's good deal. But some people don't pay like that. Some people own their homes and have to pay their taxes monthly to make it work because they're on fixed incomes. Some of them aren't going to pay that mortgage at all and go in foreclosure or that escrow payment. So, I'm hoping and praying that 95% is the number, because usually we can squeeze 96, 97%, and if we drop 2%, we're still winning. And as Alan Rosen points out every year, the Value Adjustment Board meets after we, snap the chalk line, and somebody that was assessed at $350,000 is now reassessed at $300,000, and there's another couple $100 we lose. So, we have other revenue sources that come in a little bit more than we expect, so it's usually a wash. But we'll be watching the revenue numbers very, very carefully this year, and if everything pans out the way we hope, then the problem we'll be giving you next year is, well, we're $1 million over budget instead of 750 or 650. That's not a bad thing. That we underestimated or we conservatively estimated our revenue. And don't think of it as a lack of execution. I'll let you know if it is, because that happens too. But it could be just a underestimation of revenue, or we sell Dave's Pest Control and there's $1.2 million extra in there anyhow. So there's a lot of reasons for that, but we'll see how it goes.
Okay. What else do you need from us?
Mayor, I would like, if you're so inclined, to actually give us some specific guidance on the 317 fund, if you want all of it, because there's some back-end work that we need to do, and anything we can do before we address all of the other items operationally that the council needs to determine, would certainly help us, because we've got a lot on our plate.
I know, like you said, there are a lot of those things on the 317 we might be able to get the money back from.
Just the one?
Just the one.
The
Just the one.
The gears,
Gear
well,
tractor.
There's stuff that's not on that list, Mayor, that we have already either purchased or we are about to purchase that have to be executed before December, that we are, it's kind of like the hurricane. We're paying for it with good intentions by the Secretary of Treasury that we're going to get our money back. But we know that the Secretary of Treasury or that department has great intentions, and they walk away and they give ABCD company, the consultant firm, an audit deal, and their job is to audit and find money, and they'll come to Port Orange and find money. So we've reserved, or not in that $1.9 million is some money that's set aside for repayment of that if the Secretary of Treasury and that department comes back and says, Port Orange, you owe us all $650,000 worth of CARES Act that you asked for, or that you got money for.
in which case
I don't
we'll
think
have a
that'll be.
conversation in May.
I do not think that'll happen. But I bet you we get dinged for one or two just for GP, just for general purpose.
That's out of the 3.5 million.
It is out of the
1.9.
3.5, right. That's the difference between the 1.9 and the
Right here.
3.5 in there is some cash for payback if we need it.
And Jake, I know you can't expect to recall everything on here, and I can look in the CIP.
Please.
I remember of high importance, the ball fields needed to be refenced. Did we do that already, or is that, to your recollection?
The ball field fence, part of it was replaced, if you're talking about the one that had the hole in it.
Yeah.
That's been done. I don't know about the outfield fences, whether they've been done or not, but the batting cage fences have been redone.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't have a problem with this list. Does anybody have any issues with the list?
I have one dissenting on the I-95 gate, two on the I-95 gateway, which is a known
And I would
dissent.
recommend removing the 44,000 until we determine whether or not CARES Act will fund that.
I think we can accept that recommendation right now.
But if CARES Act doesn't fund it, we can make it happen still.
At a later point, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Then I'm okay with that.
That'll be part of that 650,
As long
it'll be
as-
680.
Yeah.
And we should know by December on that.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know that I want to take that much of a hit to our, to that $3+ million right now to do everything on here. I'd like to start out with the imperatives and.
Well, here's what happens.
Rationale?
I understand. We
You don't, you allocate it, but all that doesn't get done in a year anyway.
And I, just from a education standpoint, can I ask for the rationale for that?
Well, yeah, and actually, you just brought up what I wasn't considering, the fact that it's not going to get done in a year. I just didn't want to. It's just a big chunk out of that reserve, but at the same time.
And it's also a big chunk because we've been punting so many times too.
I get
So yeah,
it. Again, I'm not opposed.
Piles up.
I will tell you that a majority of this will be done. The City Hall HVAC is a 3-phase program, so that's one phase of it. That will be done. The City Hall repurposing phase 1 is, well, it's in a state of flux because of COVID, but we could get all this stuff done in a year. And oh, by the way, of that 3.5 million that we have, there's a bunch of stuff that's on our list that isn't on this list that we have teed up for next year. We just didn't want you to choke on $3.5 million worth of CIP stuff that we
Gee,
might
thanks,
not
Dad.
be able to get done. Keep in mind that drainage and water have big things going on. We replace, 5 lift stations a year, 3 or 4 lift stations a year. We're doing some of that in-house to save money. We have that class pipe that we need to replace next year. So we are not ahead. We are behind. If you recall the half-cent sales tax list, that now has to be funded by us. Well, it was always going to be us, but now funded by this account, if you will. So we're going to have to pay the piper sometime. Keep in mind also that our taxpayers have been paying for this stuff now by virtue of that fund balance climbing for 3 years, and we haven't bought anything with it. So we need to spend the taxpayers' dollars, or they're going to tell us we're taking too much money from them and doing nothing with it. So that $3.5 million is above your policy, and it's for this stuff that we didn't budget for in 19 and 18, 19 and 20. From a financial philosophical
Well, and that's why I
point of view.
support it. I think, the concern was, and it's not a holdup, it's just a concern if something really much more pressing comes up.
You have
and I'm
30%.
closer back,
You have 30% reserve
and that's where I want to
exactly
avoid
for
having
that.
to go into that. But
That's a
I-
rainy day
That's what
fund.
it's
That's what
for.
it's for, though.
That's
When
what it's
it
for.
rains.
It's a rainy day fund, and if it rains, we'll talk about it.
Well, we seem to be a lot more willing to go into that 30% than we have been.
We're not
But that's
And we're not
yet.
into the 30%.
But I know, but the comments just now, well, that's what it is, where we're willing to go into it. We've guarded against that for quite some time. Now there's more of a willing to, which,
So I want to back up and make sure we're not messing up here. The policy is 30%. That money is protected, put away, not to be used unless we have an emergency. We have $3.5 million above that we have taxed our taxpayers that we have not used. By saving that, basically what you're saying is, I want the fund balance policy to be 40%.
no, I'm not suggesting not spending that. I'm saying I'm okay with these imperatives that need to be done, and getting to these essentials and important desirables, I'm all right with that too. I just want to make sure I don't get too close to going below our 30% policy and not have enough to get on something that is going to be a much more pressing need with some of these on the lower scale. That's my
I'm with you. Now I'm with you.
That's
All right.
my point.
And we'll still have $1.5 million to mess with, and maybe more based on.
I know how quick that goes, so.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, it does. You're
that's
right.
That's my point, though.
You're right.
I'm not opposed to any of it.
Scott?
Yeah, just to make a comment to Chase's comment there, is I would just ask Chase, just keep in mind that the 30% threshold we established a few years ago is still nearly double what the GFOA recommends. So we're still at 30%, we're ultra conservative. In fact, I was enlightened recently that Orman is only at 15, and they stay at 15 as a matter of practice, which, hey, to each their own, but just to give you some confidence of how good 30% is, it is extremely conservative. When I came on council, I believe the year I came on council, we were actually just over or just under 50. And that's where we decided it was time to establish a policy and start taking care of these projects and these needs that were basically not getting handled, and that money wasn't being spent effectively. So just to comment on the 30% number is that you know, there may be times, not necessarily right now, but times in the future where we dip under 30. And even so, you know, if we go to 28 or 25 or 24, if we have an event, you know, we have a natural disaster or some kind of an emergency where we have to go into that 10%. Even if we go into it 10%, we're still going to be above that GFOA. So that's a confidence that I have. I think that the 30% is a good policy. But it's really, really conservative. So I think we should all feel very comfortable with that. Now that being said, what I don't want to see is I don't want to see projects that we have that need to be done, especially the imperative projects and the critical projects, and we're still sitting at 35, 36, 37, 38%. Just doesn't make sense. I think that the taxpayers' dollars need to be invested back into the city, and yet at the same time we maintain that 30% margin or threshold there for those rainy day events, because we certainly have seen those in the past. So just a comment on that. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, one more, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, just to respond to that, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's, and I'm 100% in agreements to that, and good comments about, you know, us having a policy well above some of the other cities. I can't believe some of the other cities are able to do what they're doing with some of their reserves. The foundation of my remarks were because previous years when we've had discussions about going into reserves, there's always been a hesitation with us because of our policy of being well above everybody else because of the last few years being hurricanes. We've dipped into almost every single penny of it in some respects. So I bring those comments up just to keep that consciousness aware within us as we're going into that. I'm fully supportive of utilizing those extra funds, which we should be going after these things. There's no reason for us to be up there, but I don't want to lose the diligence that we do have in holding on to those reserves for those emergencies.
I think we're finding a lot of different ways to say the same thing.
Yeah, well, and I wanted to make sure I was communicating my side, my position correctly.
I got
Gotcha.
it. Yeah,
Marilyn,
thanks.
you had something to add?
I was gonna say that my time on council, I've realized all these are important and we can't keep ignoring our infrastructure. I think what might help council's level of comfort as well as the public, when we see a list like this, we tend to think everything's either gonna kick off from the top down or all at once. And if we saw, if you will, a Gantt chart of the projects, you know, what may be kicking off in November, December, and then later in the year, the benefit to that is it can give us the security as well as the citizen. Yeah, we've earmarked the money, but if in fact something untoward happens or something else comes up, you know, maybe we're not gonna start it in 21, we're gonna lag it to 22. So that, you know, I think visually that may give us some comfort. Like I'm looking at resurfacing parking lots. I remember discussing that previously and how even though it's only listed as important, it's really becoming a critical issue.
It is.
Well, I don't think you're gonna do all of them in the same month. I suspect you're gonna space those out so that if you get, let's say, 75% of them done and something happens, we can just, a decision will be made by your manager and the director, well, let's just push some of that off.
And those are cash flow decisions.
Yeah,
certainly.
exactly. So
Yeah,
I think
we already
that
do
might
that.
help us.
We already do that. We don't, at budget season, we don't project when our projects are gonna be done. But during the year, we can tell you where the projects are gonna fall out based on when we think they are.
And you absolutely have to
But,
because our
but
revenue stream is not even.
Right, but I'm thinking once we pass the budget, it might be helpful, understanding it's gonna change, that, you know, we get a picture just as an information piece, or maybe something in our
Yeah, we can do
discussion
that.
with you,
Yeah.
which says, you know, Public Works gonna do these 3 things in January, Rec's gonna do this. You know, I'm thinking the Gantt chart, so visually you can see it.
Sure.
And we get sort of a sense, which also would help us as we respond to citizens.
Absolutely. And some of that, you know, in a very minor form, some of that's on the website and in the weekly. We do the paving out
Yeah.
front, but so I see what you mean, a more of a holistic approach.
Yeah, I don't wanna know all the little, but just sort of
Yeah,
the
we can
big,
work on that.
you know.
You bet.
Another tool for us.
You
Just one
bet.
other thing to remind council too, that once you're approved on these, we set these up as projects. So you'll remember at year end, if we don't have something completed, we give you a rollover on the project.
Yep.
So what we've done though is to tag the funding for that, so when we do
Mhm.
need to do it, we do have the money available.
Okay.
And we don't have to come back to council.
So I know we have to get over to Lakeside for the joint, but it sounds like, and I'd like to meet one more time when Councilman Stiltner's back, but it sounds like we're leaving no vehement opposition to anything. There was a conversation about the rec manager, which can wait till we find out what's going to happen later on tonight. And so we're going to leave everything on for now and have one more meeting to really pound this out and go into first and second reading. And like the mayor said, the big elephant in the room is something that's unresolved right now, so I can't tell you what the savings or unsavings will be after that.
I'm a little confused as to why we need another meeting if it looks like we've generally got consensus and you have presented that you can make do with all of these funds.
Because based on my past experience, I think when I provide
Oh,
you,
when you leave here.
when I provide you the, we did what you said and here's the
I'm with you,
millage, you
Marilyn,
will all
but-
choke and go, time out.
I'm
The
with you.
gavel will go down and somebody will beat me up and then bring me back out here. I think after we get some solid ground with our negotiating team, that we owe it to you to come back before first reading and show you what we think the millage will be and see if that's the period of time where you want to start cutting service levels, you're happy with the millage rate that's presented, or you want us to start gutting some other items or otherwise find money somewhere else. And I'm not going to discuss what those options are, but I think you know the ways that we can cut the budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That concludes our presentation.
Thanks, Scott.
Item five, sign code update.
Let's go, Tim, run.
So, we'll do a kind of a abbreviated version here. I'll try to get the PowerPoint up. Essentially, what happened is
Who are you, sir?
Tim Berman, Community Development. Trying to make it quick.
Yeah, go.
Yeah. So basically, we are currently in the process of updating the code to go based from a content-based to a content-neutral sign code regulations. Pretty much, if you look at our sign code, it is pretty much about 45 pages, and the way to read it is to say, I want to put up a grand opening sign. We go and look at those code requirements. We can't do that anymore. No.
This is one of the fallouts of Reed versus Gilbert.
Correct. So we are currently going back through that. The biggest thing that we've got to target and look at is essentially the temporary signs.
Oh.
So we are shifting from that kind of point of calling them temporary signs because we have about
I'm sorry,
20
what did you call those, peppery?
temporary.
Oh, temporary.
Temporary. And then we're not going to call them that anymore. So here is just an example of some of the temporary signs regulations that we have. As you can see, there's a wide range of different sizes, different time frames, and different regulations that apply to each one of them. We've got to get away from that. So what we can do is we can regulate using items such as height, number per lot, specific location, period of use, maintenance, and upkeep. So that's the way we are shifting our code to apply that to signs. Essentially, not really worrying about the words anymore, just the object that you're sticking in the ground, hanging on the wall, or permanently installing is the shift we're going to. So kind of the old way with banner, temporary signs, those are being changed essentially to large yard sign and small yard sign. getting rid of that temporary kind of connotation to it then. Essentially, our section, like I said, the temporary signs is about, 20 pages within that 40-page document. We're looking to pare that down to a simple chart, something like this. Going to have to, refine some more numbers in here as we work through. But the overall intent is to allow for essentially a single-family or two-family dwelling unit, 2 signs allowed on their property, a maximum of 6 square feet. That would be basically allowed then. That could be anything from the yard person sign to a election sign that they'd want to put in their yard then. They would have those 2. There's no time frame on it, just specific size. We're looking at 2 on the non-residential and multifamily to allow them the same type of small yard signs, but also some caveats that since those are the larger tracts of land, which are typically undeveloped or under for sale then, to write some regulations that would allow them to have those 32 square foot signs for those projects in that case then.
Jim, would that, like this non-residential, well, maybe not, where would a realtor for sale sign fit in?
The realtor for sale sign would be one of the 2 that you can put on your property.
And duration would be NA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, the intent is that you can have 2 signs up in your yard. There's no duration. We also wanted to look too in terms of code enforcement. Some cities we've seen put limits on there, 65 days, but then you're having to have, how do you know it's 65 days? So the discussion was to keep it more toward 2 on there. We put some maintenance requirements. You can't have it hanging down or overgrown as a way to regulate that then.
More to the point.
So that's what we're trying to do. Get some sign regulations or some regulations in here. Also not overburden us in terms of enforcement. And the criteria, again, this is just an example. We're still working on it, but the general intent is to allow 2 on residential. You can have the for sale sign, and then also if you're doing a yard sale sign to get rid of the stuff before you move, you're still in compliance.
Jim, the yard sale signs and open house signs for realtors, temporary signs.
Those would be called yard signs moving forward.
Okay.
So we get that one thing that we looked at too, because a lot of times during the election season, you want to have more than the 2 that would be allowed. So in talking with city attorney today, we kind of crafted up some ideas. Again, we got to kind of fine tune this, but you can say with an election year, during the months of August, October, November timeframe, you're allowed to up that number of yard signs on your property from 2 to 4. That would apply basically both to your commercial sites and also your residential sites to give them the opportunity to put more, political signs up during those timeframes then.
Can you go over that again, Mr. Jones? Explain the difference of that. If you don't know what it is without reading the content, then you can't determine what gets the number more or what gets less.
Yeah, and that's why we propose it the way he mentioned there. We're not we're not saying you get 2 election signs or 2 political signs. We're saying you get 2 signs within these time periods, recognizing as a city that during those periods of time they're likely going to be election signs. But because we're not addressing the content of the sign, we can draft a regulation.
So they can put extra signs of any topic on there.
Yeah,
I
they
got
could
you.
put
And
4
you just
signs
do
for
it
the yard
during
guy up there, then,
election
or 4
season.
signs of their favorite football team during those
Gotcha.
months then. We just wanted to give that opportunity because we know it kind of will come up during those time frames then.
Gotcha.
What
Probably not the Browns though.
does this cover? Something like a COVID? I'm thinking of a business that might opt to have a large sign, and then COVID comes up and they want to do something that says delivery available or whatever the heck. Is there
We've
a
got some.
contingency or an emergency?
We've got some banner provisions in here that would be coming along then too. That they
Okay.
could utilize the banners on that then.
And we're currently under an executive order that does
Yeah.
just that. So we
Yeah, I would
temporarily
get it.
suspended many
Yeah.
of the sign provisions for commercial businesses advertising that they're open to the
Okay.
residents due to COVID.
So this current code's going to allow already 2 and then 2 addition during the, or did you say 1? I'm sorry.
This is the proposed. So
Proposed.
basically, it will be allowed pretty much 2 year round.
2 year round
And
and
then
then
during
2
those
additional.
certain time frames, you can have 2 additional ones. Whichever
We're not
content you want.
referring to medians and right-of-ways.
No, this
for
is
here.
all
So
within
Big
your-
lots is still gonna,
on
is
your
now
own property.
actually
It's
gonna
gotta
be
be-
allowed to do their thing, but not on the medians. So they wanna have it on their yard, their
Yeah.
property, they can do
Well,
that.
and just to be clear, big lots can't do that
For
today.
example.
Yeah, under today's code, we don't allow signage in
I
the
know,
city
but
right.
going forward, we would have to.
We would not have to. We can still prohibit all signs in public right of way.
No, not in the right of way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But if they want to do it on their property,
Oh, okay. Yeah, on their
Yeah.
property, they would have the limit that we're discussing for commercial properties. And we haven't, I mean, we're saying 2 and 4, and we're kicking around those numbers because we're kind of looking at, well, what does it look like today? We don't want it to look a lot
Sure.
different from where we're at today. So those aren't set in stone yet, but that's kind of what we've talked about.
And when he's referring to property, we're not talking about the entire parking lot, we're just talking about their footprint, correct? Or
What
we,
was that?
he was talking about big lots
Well,
and,
that's actually one unified piece of property then.
yeah,
So that would be essentially the landlord or the property owner would be the one that has, is given the right to have X number of signs on that property.
okay.
So if Big Lots decided to put 12 out there then, we'd be able to, pull up the, let's say the 8 then, and then also the landlord can dictate how many that they want on there too. Just as like with the yard signs too, HOAs could reduce that number
Right.
on their own too. We're not, part of that then, we're just kind
Well,
of setting that baseline then.
HOAs can outright ban them, that they have, I mean, they've, you sign that document, you abide by those docs, so they can outright ban signs.
and how many of them proposed for commercial, did you say?
Basically, it's going to be 2 across the board. In terms of the small yard signs, will basically be 2 across the board, regardless of what the zoning is. Then, again, the large yard signs is something that we'd work toward. Basically, those larger developments that are for sale, or basically, developing them.
Right.
The other thing we want to talk on was some permanent signage things that we were looking to expand on. One is kind of the A-frame sandwich board sign. Currently, the code does not allow those. We'd like to make those allowed for any commercial business. It's got to be within a certain distance of the front door, plus make sure that ADA is met terms as they're passing by then. We feel that's the way that they could do any type of advertising they wanted by their front door and kind of go from there. So we'd like to do that as adding that. Also, the projecting signs. This is basically can be utilized in some of our areas along the Ridgewood corridor where we got small confined areas then on the buildings, have those projecting signs. And, would like to explore putting that in there in terms of one of the regulations then. The rest of these signs are pretty much ones that are already in our code. We will just basically be kind of the content-based direction that those are going and make them more content neutral then as we bring an amendment forward. There's no change proposed in terms of square footage or quantities on that then. We're pretty good on that then. So I don't know if anyone had any objections to looking at the A-frame or sandwich board signs or the projecting signs
They're
Is
fine.
a flag sign a banner sign or something different?
coming up.
Oh, okay.
Also, too, on monument signs, we're going to look to basically allowing some different types of options. Currently, the code allows for just the standard monument base, solid base. Looking for some areas in redevelopment corridors to allow different signage options as a way to reduce the cost, but to get them signage. Electronic message center signs. There's been some discussion about looking at that in terms of could it, codes. We currently have it allowed for multi-tenant buildings to keep that, to update that. Also expand it possibly to all properties, or just looking at how we could look at to basically be government-specific messaging, such as around city center, anywhere within the city center complex or government-owned property. I didn't know if there was any interest in exploring that further in terms of electronic message centers.
I'm ambivalent myself.
So the reason we bring up the government is because our city center sign is broken right now, and I'm looking for some direction, not tonight, but on this ordinance or this sign ordinance, so we can move forward or bulldoze it and call it a day. I like that sign, and I want to bring it up into the 21st century, but I don't want to spend the money if we're not going to allow anything or stuff in the for government or just government and not private or commercial. So those are discussions that we need to have.
So we could just craft some language together and bring that forward then. Basically we feel is best then. Last one is there's been some discussions on temporary banners and feather flags. Currently the code allows for temporary banners, or banners again within specific time frames, so that would be eliminated, just calling essentially a 40-day period then. Also, feather flags are prohibited right now. We basically have kicked the idea around in terms of that, in terms of, you could have the specific number of days allowed that they could occur with a required permit. Also, regulating them on specific areas within the city of Port Orange. Don't think, as we kind of talked about all the work that's being done along the Dunlawton corridor, typically you wouldn't want to see those feathered flags throughout the corridor there, but maybe somewhere along the Ridgewood corridor where we're trying to get new businesses started. We've got the recent code amendments to basically, for the targeted businesses, a feather flag could be something that they could use for the initial startup there to get some exposure there. But we just don't want to see those kind of become a permanent fixture in terms of signage then. So that's where we're kind of balancing the idea is to have, at least allow them with a time limit then, and we can, permitting there, that way we can kind of, see how that goes then versus the current prohibited state right now.
That's fine.
Can you go tell them we're gonna be late? I'm late.
We gotta go.
So again, we keep the banners, which they could use too, in addition to
Feather flags.
the feather flags then, and then
That'll
we'd
work.
be looking at specific corridors within the city that we would apply that regulation to.
That'll work.
No objections, bring some language. Or
Will you
recommendations.
be
Scott has a question.
sending this perhaps to the chamber or the business community for their comments before it comes to us?
Yes, idea was to come here. That was the next slide. Basically, was kind of the next steps was to come here and get some input then, and then we we're going to prepare kind of a little bit more detailed, more handouts then to kind of explain these situations, and then get with the chamber. Last time we did a sign and code update about 10 years ago, we actually had a meeting at the chamber with the business community, invited the council at that, and we're thinking of exploring something similar to that then. That way we get their feedback and council can show up then, you can hear their feedback too, before we make those final drafts and take it to planning commission then.
My only comment on the feather is two businesses have talked about it in my district, and both of them, one of them happens to be set back quite a ways on a road, so the most prominent access, they would want the feather flag out by Ridgewood to point that they're down the road. The truth is you're not going to be able to read the feather flag, but they could in their advertising saying, look for the green feather, look for the blue one. Then another, wait, that one's on Dunlawton. Then the other one is on Ridgewood, and their drive is a little bit deceptive, as is the building. So I guess I'm just sort of saying that 40 days, you might want to consider, making that 3 times a month. That'd be 36. I mean, something that's a little more, instead of just 40 consecutive days.
40 days total, right?
Well, I think they were probably thinking 40 consecutive.
It could be 40 days throughout the year then.
Okay, but I just am trying to, some of the businesses that, I get why we don't want it out every day, but it does make it difficult on them if they can't do the hanging sign or the banner sign, because their building is set back and you're never gonna see it from the road.
Right. We'll take a look at that. If I could get the businesses offline then,
Sure.
that way we can go out there and see then, and maybe we can work on something to craft for, them, which would work for other ones that come in that same kind of characteristics then.
Yeah.
We gotta go.
Hey,
That it?
Tim.
Oh, scared.
Oh, Scott's here with us still.
No, I just wanted to, just a real quick comment for Tim. I wanted to echo Marilyn's comments because I was thinking that exact thing. I just want to make sure that we're maybe even a little bit hypersensitive to our older business district in the layout of the design of a lot of the buildings that don't have the marquee signage on the building and different things like that, because I really do want to make sure that in that river district that every single business and anybody that's looking to invest down there has every single opportunity to succeed down there. So I just want to make sure, I think getting the feedback from the chamber is excellent, but I want to make sure that specifically in that district down there that we're not going to do anything that's going to make it harder already for somebody to attract business into that corridor.
Understood.
Anything else?
That's all.
All right. Thanks a lot. We will reconvene in a few minutes with Parks and Rec Board.